There you go, slightly chaotic, but you get the idea. There you go. That's me.
Thanks. So very nice. It's nice to hear you talk about tradition and the kind of fluidity of tradition as well. As someone who is part of a sort of 21st century community of practice of live coding, this way of making music with programming languages, which only really came together as a community over the last sort of decade or so. It's very nice to work with someone who has that nice bridge with tradition and start to look for bridges to tradition from the kind of thing I do, which is live coding. As I say, I've done this before at ODI, but just to demonstrate, it's about describing pattern with programming language. So being able to just work with very simple pattern manipulations, but compose them together into something more complex. Let's see. So it's about working with these very, it's all working with text, so it's very digital in that sense, with these discrete elements that you're composing together. But that's the same as what you have with one of these music strips, is very discrete, digital, that you either have a hole in a certain position or you don't, sort of things, very binary in that sense. And so it's interesting to think of a music box as being a digital instrument in the same way as a laptop is. And it's true, but only to some extent, because although one axis of this is very digital, the other axis is very analog, because you can place a note on any position along this music strip. And so, in other words, time is analog, but pitch is digital. You have this nice X and Y of digital and analog working together, which is kind of beautiful, really. And it'd be nice if computers were a bit more like that, and that's something that I try and develop. My idea of live coding as being something that can have that same sort of interference between analog and digital. But what I've made for today is, and for future collaborations with David, is it's a music box, but it's got a webcam inside the box. So I think you can see me there. Yeah. So if I put this through here, you can see the holes appear, and hopefully this quite dodgy bit of code will recognise the notes. So it's recognised that as a G and that as an E. And then I can read that into my live coding. So let's take that set of samples and just plug that in there. Just need to add a number to pitch it up a bit. So that's the G and E. So if I wind it on, you should hear it change as... And then I can actually work with the live coding to manipulate this pattern, reversing it, for example. That's got a bit unstable. Or I get the idea. Or I could just change the sample set and turn it into Gabba techno. See what that does. So yeah, what else did I want to say? So yeah, it's nice to think of tradition as being something that isn't fixed and changes as it gets passed from one person to the next, as Dave was talking about. And from that perspective, it's nice to think of live coding as being a kind of oral culture, because what I type here, I'm just going to delete at the end, and you'll just maybe take some ideas with it from you about the structures I've made and maybe make something with it yourself. And I like that kind of thought of using technology as something live for the moment, but also something that gets passed from one person to next just through memory and yeah, this tradition. Get away from the idea of digital preservation and sort of get more to the idea of digital tradition, which is much more live. But yeah, I don't think I want to say too much more than that. Maybe we should go into more of a collaboration at this point. I should say that I took a physical copy of a strip and managed to punch it perfectly to recreate the same tunes so that we can play together. Right. How long have we got, Hannah, for this bit, do you think, before people need to get back to their desks? 10 minutes. Should we do a 10-minute number? Right.
Name that tune. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really, really wonderful to hear. And I think both of your practice is such a great reminder of the origins of technology, you know, expression and craft and art, and a thing that comes from us. It's not something that is applied to us. And also it's lovely to see this work together to remind that there's not the digital world and the real world, that it's all the real world, and it's all the stuff we do and stuff we share. So that's great. We do have a few minutes for questions, so if anyone's got any questions, we would love to hear them. This doesn't amplify your voice, it's for the streams.
Okay. So I really liked it. It was really cool, but I kind of wondered, like, there wasn't at any point a big, like, hook or a drop, right? And I sort of thought that's because, like, it's quite chaotic and you're sort of, like, heard in the sound a lot. You're not sort of using it like a puppeteer sort of does with his piano. I wondered, is that just because that's the way you want to play, or is it kind of difficult with the tools to create a sort of recurring hook, if you know what I mean?
It's difficult. I think when we're playing together, it can be difficult, because if Alex picks up a tempo, I can be completely out of tempo with what he's doing, and trying to bring it back in is quite difficult. So maybe that's why. I mean, I think when I play by myself, and I think definitely when you play by yourself, we definitely sort of build around a melody. But I think for today we were sort of built. It sort of went up slightly abstract, but you never quite know. When you start, you've got your first notes, and then after that, you don't really know where it's going to go. So you're just trying to vibe off each other really, and try and find a commonality within. Because I was playing a strip, and I've no idea what the next note's going to be. So I don't even know if it's going to be it's in the same key, but I don't know what it's going to be. So I have to just be kind of mindful about trying to guess what it might be and whether it fits in.
Yeah, because it is improvised, so you just go where it takes you really, and it started off as this sort of ambient wash, which sounded very nice, and so I just went in that direction. But I think there is a particular quality of live coding, which means that those sort of sharp transition sort of drops are quite hard to do. Sort of the gradual building up of complexity of code is what you hear in the music as well, sort of slow progression, and those sort of sudden turning points are less common. But I see that as a challenge and something to work on, different ways of structuring things so that you can sort of go back and forward between parts and sort of develop hooks and things. But
Becoming more proficient with what you're playing as well, so you know that you can turn it.
Do we have any more questions or comments? Or feedback?
You mentioned working with fabrics. Do fabric patterns have tunes, and have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done a lot with almost every form of textile making, from embroidery patterns to lace patterns, woven textile patterns, and they all have their own quality, actually. The woven patterns, if you think about jacquard, punch cards stuff, they tend to have a very rigid, if you're playing on the music box, there's a lot of chords that go on just by the nature of the pattern. Whereas embroidery, you tend to get single notes in there much more, so it's much more spaced out. Whereas you tend to get repetition of chords in a jacquard loom pattern, with most jacquard loom patterns. The same with kind of knitting machine patterns, the same lace knitting machine patterns, the same thing. You tend to get a lot of repetition with the occasional note missing, and then a lot of repetition, and then a slight transition again as it follows the pattern. Yeah, but there's a lot of people doing it actually. There's quite a lot of people around the world who are exploring within their own culture their own kind of textile patterns and sonifying those using music boxes or various other technologies. So it's quite a growing movement really of people.
Alex, did you want to tell people about this piece that you've made with Helen Halisius Kluck, which is part of the Thinking Out Loud exhibition?
Yeah, I'm not sure how visible it is on the stream.
Well, I'll reference it. It's called Unborn by Ellen Halisius Kluck.
Yeah, so this is a piece, it's an image that I made of a piece of music. So the sound is actually turned into this two-dimensional image, which Ellen has then woven into the structure of this fabric, so that you can see it in the textile. And it's a very beautiful looking fabric. But the techno, the music is actually really fierce techno, which is quite a interesting comparison if you listen to it. It's really interesting working with Ellen actually, and really finding out how amazing the structure of weaves are and always have been. This is sort of sort of Stone Age technology that is around us everywhere, but somehow we don't see it unless we're textile artists or craftspeople. It's yeah. The more you look at the structure of textiles, the more you realise how complex it is, and just as complex as the structure of a computer, which is no coincidence. Actually, Ellen's whole idea is that the basis of discrete mathematics, which computation is based upon, comes from the structures of weaves as the predominant technology in the Neolithic era. That's a long story.
Then if we've got time for one more question, or do we need to wrap up? We've got one more if anybody's got something burning they'd like to say.
So you do a lot of improvisation and collaboration when you're performing together. And you said how it's quite abstract often and you can't necessarily anticipate what you're going to play. But do you, having done a lot of improvisation myself, do you ever find yourself wanting to recreate a melody that you've stumbled across and try to do that and maybe not succeed and then get frustrated? That's what I do. So I'm just wondering if it's something you share.
Well, yeah, when I'm playing the music box, sometimes, most of the time I'm kind of recording and looping it live and taking a sample of it and then transforming that. And sometimes you play the music box and there's a really nice melody comes through but you haven't recorded, press record. So you've missed that melody and you can't go back because you have to go all the way through the strip to get back to a point, and that melody is like 3 notes that you didn't know was going to happen, which is a really thing you think, God, I could hook that and that would be off, we'd take it to a new place. So there are those moments where the music box can be frustrating because you kind of miss it. But I don't tend to play the same strips again. Really, I tend to come with a new strip or a new thing that's created as a result of a workshop or something. So it's sort of it's always a different strip. But I suppose if I was more thorough with it, I could build stuff from home.
Yeah, I think I'm the same really. I really enjoy sort of doing new things with performance, and very quickly get bored if I'm redoing the same things. I do have certain things which work and I remember, and then I'll bring them to future performances, almost as things to fall back on. But with this language, it's constantly in development. It's an open source project with lots of people contributing to it, and I always feel that I'm learning it during a performance, which is something that I do really enjoy, actually, just exploring ideas and coming across new structures and things, or new to me, as part of a sort of live experience.
What is it?
Oh, sorry, it's called Tidal Cycles. That should be a good enough Google search term, but tidalcycles.org, yeah.
Which is software that you've written, Alex,
Yes.
for people to do live coding with.
Yeah. I've developed it over a long time now, but over the last few years, more people have used it, and now it's quite a vibrant community of musicians and developers sort of building it. So, yeah.
Well, Alex and David, thank you so much for a very unusual and very lovely lunchtime
for
lecture.
inviting
Thank you.